Always remember to do your own research as some of the tools that I'm about to show in this series are very new. Hey, welcome back to the series where we are building an NFT card generating tool from start to finish. So in the previous video, we completed all of our tasks and the last one we completed was creating the NFT ID scanner. So we left off where we ran the code and we could see the NFT IDs here returned from a specific wallet. So, just to recap, if you don't know what we're doing, please watch this entire series. It's all about creating NFT cards that we can have in a physical form. So, let's continue with this video. Okay, so today's video is all about creating the metadata resolver for the NFT tokens. Now, what does this mean? We're going to put this in progress and go to our process flow. So from the start, we load the ENVs, then we go and get the token IDs, which you saw we have, and then we actually need to fetch the metadata of the NFTs. NFT metadata is the stuff that tells the NFT what the image is, what traits it has. So if we go to any NFT, so let's say this one, and I go down and I just go to the details section and I click on the token ID, you can see that it's a link. And this link takes us to some metadata stored on Arweave. I know it's on Arweave because of the URL here. And we get things like the name, description, attributes and traits, but also, very importantly, we get the image, which we want to use later on for the NFT card. We can also see that this image is on Arweave too. But what's important is if we go ahead and we remove this part and we just use the gateway and this hash, each token collections hash would be different, right? And we swap out anything here. Let's say we wanted to look at token 6607. If we go to this, we will get token 6607's metadata. So if we combine this knowledge, we have a URL and we can then pick and choose from the IDs what metadata we can get. We can create some sort of helper class that can extract this metadata for us. And that's what we want because eventually we want to use its name and also the image. So back in the code, we can go to the env file that we set up before, and I can just now go and add an extra key. This will be the NFT metadata base URL. Now, basically, this is the arweave.net. This might be IPFS. If you have a collection which has data on IPFS, it will work the same. We can just cap it here. Remember, it will be / an ID.json, right? But we're going to not include the /. We're just going to keep it like this. And now we can focus on building out that metadata resolver. So as we see in our process flow, we need to somehow get that metadata from the IDs, right? So we can also look at this in our infrastructure diagram here, that we will need some sort of metadata service, right? So again, I'm going to copy this, which is just the INFT metadata service. This is so that we can create a new interface. So in our interface folder, let's create this service. This needs to be a .ts file. And in here, we can export a new interface that we're going to build, the INFT metadata service. So the only function we want to define is maybe get metadata. And this will be a function that's going to take in maybe all the NFT tokens. So token IDs, and then this will be of type string array as we get that back from our previous service. Now, what this will return to us should be some sort of promise. And the promise is going to be of a more complex array structure. So we need to go and define that first. So firstly, we need to define exactly what the metadata would look like. Now, I've already done it in a very slimmed down version, and here it is. So it's a new interface, which is just the INFT metadata. It contains the name, description, image, and then attributes array for if we want to use it at some later stage. We really only care about the name and the image for now, but it's always just good to plan ahead for if we need that. And now we can actually define the data structure that we're going to work with. This one is simply called INFT data. So it contains a token ID because we do not want to lose it once we have it, right? We want to keep track of the ID. And then also we have our metadata, which is of this type over here. Now with this, we can return an NFT data array. So INFT data array, which would be an array of this. Okay. And yeah, that is our interfaces all sorted. So we can move on to the implementation like we did with the NFT ID scanner service. We're going to do the same, but implement an Arweave implementation. If we have a quick look here again in the infrastructure, we can see that this is the implementation, an Arweave implementation, because that's what we work with. So in our services, what we can do, we can just go and create the Arweave NFT metadata service like so. And we keep to the kebab case naming convention here. But inside the file, we can go and export a new class and we use this naming convention. So Arweave NFT metadata service. This is going to implement our new interface that we had, right? So INFT metadata service, and that gets imported there at the top for us. Now, before we implement this, we know we're going to make use of a network call. We need to fetch some data. So we can either use fetch, or I like using Axios. So in the terminal down here, I'm just going to press Command K to clear it, and then run npm install Axios. This is going to install Axios, which is a networking service, which we can then use. And then the other thing I also want to run after this is done is basically npm install -- save dev, and then the types of Axios as well, seeing that we have a TypeScript project. Fantastic. And then I can close down all the other files that we are not using at the moment. So we can just keep this clean, so you also know roughly what file we are on. So for the implementation, you see again, this is red, and that's because we need the get metadata implementation, that function we need to implement in our class. Let's go ahead and do so. In here, get metadata, can just do that, and it will autocomplete for us. Now, we do not return a promise of this type yet, but we'll build up to that. For now, just to get rid of that error, we can just do return new promise. And then we'll just put an empty function in there like so. All right, great. Now let's focus on kind of the constructor. Again, this is a class, and you'll see that Arweave here is highlighted in blue. I just need to maybe add this into my workspace. And our VS Code is happy with the Arweave word. So let's go ahead and focus on that constructor. So what we're going to pass into the constructor is just the options. I like keeping it all the same. So options would be of I option, which will define here at the top as do that. So we're going to do interface I option. And this would be holding Arweave metadata base URL. This will just be a string. That would be this base URL that we have in our environment variables. Now, the reason why we do this is so that, let's say we want to build an IPFS service, then we can build an IPFS metadata service and switch it easily in and out because we're going to pass the base URL in the constructor. So we can go ahead and use it in here. So let's start and create a private string here. So, and then we can go and set this, right? So we can go in our constructors, say this dot Arweave is going to be equal to the options. So, and now we can use this URL inside of our function and inside of the actual class. So now let's think about what we need to do. So the first thing is when we call this metadata service, we know we're going to have these token IDs. So most probably we can loop over them. And for each one that we loop over, we can go and try and reach out to the network, go and try and hit that base URI and attach the token with the JSON, right? And try and get back that response. And then we need to do some sort of test to see if we successfully got that back. And if so, we need to push it to some sort of result, which we can return. And remember, what we're going to return is essentially an array of this. Okay, now like in our previous code, we're going to start off with a try catch, and it's going to follow the same format where we're going to try some code. Let me move this up here. We're going to try some code, and if we catch any error in here, we're going to alert an app error, the one util that we've made before. We're just going to say metadata failed for one or more tokens, right? Because we don't know at that point. We can throw earlier on, which we'll do, so we'll know which token failed, but this is just a generic error that will be caught. So now here in the beginning of our try block, what we can do is let's create a new variable and call this results. This will be type of NFT data, right? And it's going to be an array. And we're just going to set it to an empty array for now, because if we don't get anything back, we at least want to return an empty array. Then we can go ahead and create a for loop. Here we're just going to say for token ID, and then of the token IDs that we get back, or that we get passed to this function here at the top. Okay. And this gives us now a way to iterate over each token ID. Let's start by defining a URL. So the URL that we're going to define is going to be made up. So we're going to use this string. So we're going to focus on the Arweave metadata URL that we got passed in. Then we have to do a /, and we're going to append the token ID that we get here for each one. And remember, we have to add the .json. So this will be our fully qualified URL. Okay. So inside of this for loop, we need to reach out. So we can say const response. So we can await for Axios .get, and then we need to now get the URL. So we can just call URL. But to make it a bit more specific about what could be returned there, is we can now say that this should be our INFT metadata that's going to be returned. And because we're using an await, let's go and make this asynchronous. So that goes away. Okay, cool. So now we should be able to get a response back here. So when we do have that, let's go and extract the metadata from Arweave. We could just say const. The metadata would be the response.data. Well, it should be that, right? We don't know if it is the correct metadata or if it is in the structure that came back. So what we do need to check is maybe here, try and validate it in some way. So one way we can do this is we know we're going to depend on the name. So we can maybe say, if there's no metadata.name, and look how nice the IntelliSense now works. Or if there is no metadata dot image, right? So if there is no name or no image, then we can throw something like this. So we can just say new app error metadata for token X is incomplete, and this will then be caught. Maybe we can wrap this in another try for each one of these. And the reason for that is so that maybe something else went wrong, right? Maybe something in the actual response went wrong as well. And we want to know which token it was at. So we can do that. And we can do this right after we have defined the URL, because that would be fine. So we can do try catch. And then this catch will be for fail to fetch and validate metadata, right? If something else went wrong. So we can take all of this and put it inside of the try. So now we have a very, very, decent error logging if something were to happen. And now all that's left to do is to push this result. So we can go to the results and we can then push basically an object, right? And so the first thing we're going to add is the token ID, because we need that. Then we need to define the metadata. And inside the metadata, we've got the name, which is metadata.name. And we also have the description. So we're not going to use the description in this program. We might, but I'm just going to add it anyway. We also have the image, metadata.image. And then we also have these attributes, again, for if we want to play around with that in our program as well. So that's it. And then lastly, we can just leave a log. So we can say metadata loaded for this token. And this will just give us a nice log in the terminal as we run the program. I can also, just as the program starts here at the top, just put a starting log. So the starting log could be fetching and validating the metadata and then give the amount of tokens that we are checking and getting the metadata for. And then before we forget, remember we have our result. So here at the very bottom, when we return, so we're just going to return the results. Okay. So before we go, I just want to also mention with this, because we have the metadata, we can theoretically just put it in like so, and it should be fine. But I just want to do this for if we need to specifically add something else, acting like some sort of controller here. But anyway, we are all good. We are returning the results. Now, what's left for us to do is to actually, in the run file, go ahead and create a new instance of that, and then pass in the IDs and see if it works. So in the run.ts file, let's create a new constant and call it NFT Metadata Service. And again, we keep this part generic, although we do make this an Arweave implementation. But if we wanted to swap this out, we can. Now, what this will need is the Arweave metadata base URI. And we can get this from, remember, we've got the base URI here in our envs. So if I just go to the envs, we can grab that. And then let's just add it in our env checker to make sure that it is present. And then we can just go process.env for that, then add our bang character, as we are very confident that that will be there. Okay. So now if we go down to our execution here, I'm going to leave the log in there just for now. So we can do const, and then here we can maybe say NFTs with metadata. Then this would be equal to our service dot get metadata. And then all we need to do is pass in the NFT IDs. And just to have a visual of this, I'm going to do console.log and then just log this step out as well. So we'll get our IDs and then we should get the NFT IDs with their metadata. And we are done. So I'm going to clear the terminal and we're going to give it a go. So let's go and run ts node run.ts. Let's hope for the best. So we're scanning the IDs for the wallet and just enlarge the terminal as well. Oh, and then we get an error. Okay, wonderful. So let's go and try and analyze what happened. So basically, we found the 4 NFTs, which is great. And so we got in here and we see that the general one was hit. But if we go down the stack, we can see that on this token that it tried to fetch, it failed, and it says something that Axios is not defined. Let's make sure Axios is properly installed. Okay, looking at our servers, I can see that Axios was never really imported here at the top. So I'm just going to add that. And then we're going to go back via the terminal and let's run our program once again. I don't know why it didn't pick that up, but we'll see. Anyway, so we're scanning the tokens from our wallet. So this is our previous service that we coded in the previous video, and that worked. And here we go. So the promise is pending, and we can basically see as it loads successfully. Because here we can see that there's a name, there's a name, there's a name, right? But we can't really see properly because I want to actually see the actual data. And that's because here we just need to add the await keyword so we can actually await for it. Otherwise it front runs it, right? So let's run it again. It did work, but I just want to properly see the metadata logs as well. But I can tell it worked because here's the token ID, and there we can see SABC, the Sketchy A Book Club name, right? And here, now if I run it with the await, we can see the actual data coming back, our token ID and the metadata for that. So this is very, very exciting, okay? And it also means that we can put our task to done. In the next video, we're going to take this data and generate a Ethereum wallet for each one of these NFTs, which is going to be really exciting. But this is where our video for today will end. I really hope you learned something. If you did, let me know in the comments. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And as always, subscribe for more content. I hope you have a beautiful day. Till next time, cheers for now.